What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Blondes Building Equity. Today we got introduced from one of our mentors, Brandon Turner, to a guy who is young, crushing it. His name is Brody Fausett, and he actually was financially free, able to completely live off of his passive income by 25, which is crazy. He didn't stop working, of course, because when you're a hustler, I don't know if you can ever stop, but the fact that he could completely stop at 25 is super motivating. So welcome, Brody. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm stoked to be here. It's awesome what you guys have built, and if this episode sucks, we can all blame Brandon Turner. So it's great.
Exactly. That's a great point. He's a hard person to blame, though. He's just too nice with his beer.
So, Brody, tell us a little bit about how you got started in real estate. What was your first deal? What did it look like?
Yes, so it was kind of by accident. I was getting ready to go to college, and so were a lot of my buddies from high school. And believe it or not, we were struggling to find a place to rent. Everything was just full, and it was kind of last minute. We're like, what are we going to do? And my mom had always dabbled in real estate as an agent. She just kind of sold a couple houses a year. It wasn't her full-time gig by any means, but it was her idea. And she was like, hey, you should buy a house, and then your friends can also live there and rent from you. And this was such a foreign concept for me. I was like,
How's
I
that?
yes, and I legit thought you had to pay cash for the house. So this first house that I bought was like $165,000, and I'm like, Mom, I don't have 165 grand in my bank account. Like I'm just this new college kid. I don't know if you've seen my bank account, but it's not in there. And so it was
I
so
mean,
cool
when
to
I
like
started
learn.
college, I think my bank account was $500.
Right, right, 100%. Same here. And so it was cool because even then, long story short, we started looking for a place, and all I knew was like it needed to be close to college campus, and ended up finding this awesome deal. It was an off-market property, someone that knew somebody who had just passed away, and she'd kind of lived there her whole life, and the family just wanted to get rid of the home. And so me not knowing anything, calling the family like, hey, sorry your grandma died, but do you want to sell her house? And sure enough, they did. It worked out for them. But even then, it wasn't until a few months in that I started to like realize the power of real estate. I was working at Gold's Gym
Yeah.
at the time. I was going to college at the time, and like it's just busy, right? Between homework, trying to like make money so you're not going in so much debt, being a college kid, and it all of a sudden hit me when all my friends would pay me rent every single month, and I'd pay all the expenses on the property, and then there was money left over, and it was actually like a good chunk, close to like $800-900 with me living for free.
Wow.
And so all of a sudden I was like, wait a second, I'm like working all these hours at this part-time job between classes that I do not love, and this money came in passively from all my friends paying me rent. And so I'm like, okay. And they're about the same. And so I'm like, I want more of the passive income that I put in work in the beginning, but keeps paying me versus the other income that I'm constantly trading my time for money all the time.
So, how did you finance that deal? Because don't you still have to put a down payment down?
Yeah. So we did an FHA loan. And here's the cool thing. I got some help
Oh,
from
nice.
my mom's commission kickback. Her being an agent, she gave me like half the
Oh,
commission.
okay.
So it was a
Nice.
couple $1,000. But even then, it was I think the total amount was like $6,000 down is what the bank required, and so it's 3.5% down. Like I said, the purchase price
FHA is so
was
power.
yeah, and it was so cool because this is what I say to everybody. It's like, okay, you might not have that sitting in your bank account now, but we'd all agree like you can go get that. And for me, I worked construction that summer,
Yeah.
and it was like, hey, I'm just gonna work really hard this summer, save as much money as I can, and it was like everything I had. And I was thinking about this the other day because it's so interesting now looking back. It doesn't feel scary at all, but remembering in that moment, I was like, oh, I am in trouble if my roommates don't pay rent this month and decide not to pay. Like I don't know how I'm gonna pay the mortgage. And it's interesting looking back because you forget those times,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, you kind of have to go through those moments too, and I think no one teaches that. They're just like, okay, you buy and you rent it out, and everything's fine. But you have to hope that they're gonna pay you every month, because God forbid they miss a month or maybe 2 months. you don't have that in reserves most of the time when you're starting out in real estate.
And I feel like the scariest thing for us jumping in, we were
Totally.
crazy and we jumped into multi-million-dollar properties right away because we're in LA. We didn't really have a choice, you know. So that was the you know, entry.
Yeah.
We're entry at $2 million. So it was so scary for us because you think like interest payments of $16,000 a month, and you're like, if you foreclose, like say, you know, this market's crazy, that's on your record forever. That's our entire real estate career. We're never going to get a loan again. So it's so much scarier in that beginning, is if you don't have those reserves, it is scary. Even if it's under an LLC, a hard money lender, any lender can track that down back to you. So guys, never foreclose.
Yeah. Also know what you're getting into. Have a healthy amount of reserves. So did you ever have that to where someone maybe didn't pay, or you were in a position of like, I may foreclose?
No, not at all. And I think that like, cause it's interesting now, I consider myself very like conservative, which is funny because a lot of people look at how I invest. They're like, oh, like you're always investing. And so you, therefore, like you're not very conservative because you're always investing in these properties, where I'm like most of the time, most of my properties, because I try and like buy and hold. My goal is always like, how can I have, you know, twice as much income as the expenses on the property? And so I've really been focused on like quality deals versus quantity. And I love that. And even with like this first property, the mortgage on it, I actually still have it. And so I'm actually selling that in 2 weeks. It closes. And that's my first property. I've held it this whole time. But anyhow, long story short, the mortgage on it is $1,100, and at first I was renting out for around $2,200, and now it's all the way up to over $3,000 just as the market's gone up and rent's gone up. But I always love that because I'm like, even if I miss a few people, for that one I was rented out by the room and still is because of it's so close to college campus. And so if a few people decide not to pay, like that's okay, I'm fine, you know. And now there's reserves built up, obviously, but even it just took a few months with those margins and reserves were built up. So it was never putting me in a spot where, you know, it was super scary. And for me too, I always knew like, hey, worst comes to worst, I can go work construction or I can go put in overtime and I'm going to be okay. Like I'm not getting foreclosed on, basically.
Right.
You would, never make that happen.
What I've always wondered, because I've been hearing a lot about renting it out to college students, but I've always been kind of scared just because of potential like parties and them wrecking the property. Have you had any of that happen? Do you kind of have a reserve just for
damage?
You know, damage for the college students?
Yeah, such a good question, and this comes up a lot, and people hear that. I probably have, I don't know, 60 or so students that I rent to right now. So I still have a handful of like the rent by the room properties, and I love them because I feel like the good outweighs the bad, because the fact I can charge per bedroom, and I'll actually look for houses where they have a lot of bedrooms, or maybe they have a second living room that I can convert and add another bedroom or two very easily. And for me, the good has always outweighed the bad. Obviously, there's a little bit that goes into that. I always try and have like one of the students there as like the manager, and they get a discount on rent, but it's their job to kind of make sure that things are good at the house. And so that's gone well. If anything does come up,
like venting them, you're like, what's your GPA?
Yes.
Like, you know, finding the most responsible one. You're like, you are the manager.
Can I call your parents and interview them? And totally.
Wow. So, okay. And then how much equity did you have? You bought it for 160. You've kept it for so long. You're finally selling. So you were making almost $1,800 a month passive income, which is crazy off one property, one door. But also, what equity did you build throughout that process of holding it?
Yeah, such a good question. So here's what I love about real estate, and like even just this property is a great example, because it got the ball moving, and it gave me a lot of momentum because the cash flow added up really quick, especially for a college kid, you know, where I'm like, hey, I don't have to pay rent now.
Yeah.
Plus I'm making, you know, $1,000 a month. It's going in my pocket right out the gate. Like that was a lot of money for me. And so I was saving that, being smart. And then at the same time too, I got a good deal on the property, and as we know, things appreciated. And so I actually did a cash out refinance on this property. And so early on, my parents co-signed for me. I had to come up with the down payment, but they co-signed for me because they didn't have the credit. And later on, I wanted to get their name off of it, and they wanted off of it too, and so it wasn't showing up on their
Yeah.
name. And so I did a cash out refinance, got them off of it. I pulled out like 40 or 50 grand. The mortgage actually stayed the exact same because I got rid of PMI, which blows a lot of people's minds.
Yeah.
But then I took that money and went and bought the second property that I bought. And so the cool thing is, like, when I trace this back, it's been, I don't know, 10 years or so that I've owned this property now, and I'm selling it, by the way, for 500 grand. And so obviously there's a lot of equity that's built there, but I've made like over over $1 million cash because of this property. And nobody believes it, but it's because it's cash flowed for this many years. And then I did a cash out refinance, and I bought another property that cash flows really well. And then I did a cash out refinance on that one. I pulled more money. I took another property, and then I fixed and flipped this other property that paid me a couple hundred grand from that. And so all from this money that came from, this $6,000 down payment has really made me $1 million cash, not to mention all the equity and whatnot that's still sitting in the properties.
Something so awesome about your story is this is so relatable. Like anybody right now listening can be like, wait, I'm in college. I can get $6,000. Like, that's not a crazy amount of money. You can go, save, from a construction job or work those extra hours and make it happen. And to see, a lot of people, that $1 million number is the ultimate goal. That's a huge number to them. And to show, like, that was one property that you could do that. And then once you start getting in the flow, it's all about the multiples and building it up. So it's really cool to see you start from that place and have so much success. So
what was your work ethic while you were doing that? Because obviously it wasn't super passive, right? You still had to like manage the tenants and find someone to manage the tenants. How many hours a week did you put in?
I don't know how many hours off the top of my head, but not so many hours managing the property. It's changed over the years as I've added more and more to it, right? And delegated more and more. But in the beginning, they're going to school, so they're not going to leave like mid-semester. So I didn't have to worry about filling it. It was usually, and to be honest, I would say probably 70% of the students that rent, they stay there all 4 years of college. They just like staying in the same house. They move back year after year. And so that's been nice. So it just doesn't create a lot of work on screening and finding new tenants. Yes, for sure. There's so many things where it's like, oh, I'll do a little remodel here, or I'll, trade my time for money earlier on. And so I'd work really hard. Even, it's funny, my wife and I joke about it now because I got married. I bought that house before I got married, and it was up. I stayed up with my dad, kind of renovating. Like I said, we added a bedroom in the basement. And it was like about 3 a.m. and I got married the next day, and I slept on the couch. And it was just funny because we're like, that set the tone for our marriage. There's been so many of those times where you're just sacrificing late nights just to make it happen. And so going back, that was the fun stuff where you're probably trading more time than you should. And this is why I like to tell everybody too, and it's so cool with real estate and with partnerships. Like back then, I had the time and I didn't have a lot of the money. And so I was willing to trade that time for more money. Now I have more money. I don't have as much time. And so I'm willing to trade more of that money for time. And I think that's like now I've branched more into like bigger partnerships, and like that is my strategy every single time. It's like, what are my strengths that I have now, and what's somebody else, instead of partnering up where we have the same strengths, but what's my strength that fulfills, something they're missing. For me now, I have the creativity. I know how to go structure a deal and put something really cool together that's lucrative. Somebody else doesn't have time or the knowledge to go and do that, but they have a lot of money, and so they'll invest, and I don't have to use as much of my money because I have this other skill set. And so anyhow, I just love real estate for all of those reasons.
Yeah, so what has it been like for the last 10 years? Obviously, you had that crazy, awesome first deal, which is really exciting because your first deal is not always that awesome. Yeah. But how has it been now? That clicked in your mind. What was now you probably have scaled to crazy heights, but what's the last 10 years been like for you, and where are you at now?
Yeah, that's such a big question and a good question. And the first 100%, like, that was luck. That first property, like, I had the intuition, the creativity of like, okay, if I'm getting this much, and maybe I could, add a bedroom and get this much more, or maybe I could, raise rent to this, or little things like that, yes. But for the most part, 100%. I got lucky with the location of it, with all of it, and that's actually who's buying. That's why I didn't want to say too much, because of its location so close to campus. The person that's buying it is knocking it down and using it as parking because they're building an apartment complex right by college campus. So location has been huge for that. And anyhow, so that's why I'm getting like a premium for the property now, which is really cool. But started out with that, and I focused a lot on like, how do I go create these quality deals versus like a bunch of quantity, because I knew like I had limited resources as a college kid. Like I don't have all this money, right? I didn't come from my parents giving me a bunch of money growing up. And so it was literally like, how do I go replicate this process and focus on maybe somebody that might, get 5 properties that cash flow $200? How do I go collect these properties that cash flow $1,000, but be in them the same amount as they would on, each individual of those 5? And so that was kind of my focus. So for a while I stuck in that like rent by the room because it was working so well for me. And so I picked up a handful of like houses, duplexes, even fourplexes, like close to college campus, as close as I could get. And then I got into like some Airbnb stuff a little bit, which is, I'm doing a little bit of it now. I have this tiny home project that we're building right now. The first phase is almost done.
On your
Did you?
Instagram. Where is that?
Yeah, it's in Bryan Head, Utah. So I live out in Maui right now, but I'm in Utah currently for a few weeks. But one of the reasons I came is to check on this project and see how everything's going. And it's super exciting because it's going to be done in the next couple of weeks. They'll have all the insides finished. So
wow,
that's really fun.
And that's for Airbnb, right?
And that's for Airbnb. Yeah, that's for Airbnb. So excited about that project. We'll have a total of 24 units when that's all done. But the main thing I kind of got into was like ground up student housing. So that was one thing where when the market started getting higher, I'm like, this rent by the room thing has worked so well for me because I can charge more per bedroom and get way more out of a house than I would to a family. And then prices of homes started going up so much. And so I'm like, what are the closest, like vacant lands, or what are some houses that I could maybe buy and knock down that are zoned for student housing? And so I have a few projects like that even going on right now that we're building close to college campus. But the whole design is, how do we maximize the number of bedrooms so that we can get the most ROI from that? And so I would say probably the biggest thing for me that I've dipped into more and more is, how do I go create these quality deals, but with really, really high cash on cash returns? And so kind of the last few years have been more partnering, like I was talking about earlier, where like I'll go get, it might take me 6-7 months to lock down the property. Some cases I'll buy the land, or some cases I'll just put under contract and then go get everything, approved through the city to make sure it's good to go. If I have to do a zone change on something, I'll take care of all of that. And then I'll partner with somebody who doesn't want to do all of that or doesn't know how to do all that, and they'll input a lot of the cash. And so right now, my portfolio consists of mostly student rentals, to be honest, but some of those are single family houses. Some of those are still duplexes and fourplexes. And then a couple small apartment complexes. And then we're building a 16 unit right now that's a mixture of townhomes that have basement apartments to rent out as well. So that's kind of a mixture of all of it together over the last few years.
Okay, so I have one question, because we know someone that does a lot of student housing as well. He has like big apartment complexes next to colleges here in LA, but they kind of suffered a little bit during COVID because everyone was on school online.
Yeah.
Is that something that you're kind of prepared for? Have you seen like a drop in people going to campus because there's a lot of options to just do it online? Has that made housing cheaper to get into, or how does that work?
Yeah, great question. And there's people that probably have way more units than I do, and they're spread out way across the US. But as far as like all the stuff I've had, students most of them didn't want, they didn't know when school was going to start back up again, and they didn't want to move back in with their parents. And so it was better for them. They still had friends where they're going to school, they still had a part-time job, and then they were doing online school. And so it just made sense for them to stay where they were with housing. And a lot of it depends on the university as well. Like there's still, I mean, even now, at least like where we do our research and look to build, it's schools that want to expand and want to grow versus ones that are pushing the online stuff. And so I think that plays a big part as well.
Yeah, because that would be huge to know if, you know, you're building housing and then it goes online.
Yeah.
You're like,
100%.
and then they don't really need to live there.
Yeah, something I love. I mean, it's just been so eye-opening. I mean, we obviously go to so many meetups. You know, Brandon Turner, and this podcast, we've just been networking like crazy in the community and getting to share with our audience. It's just so awesome that there's so many different strategies. You can do so many different things, and I think every person, what they've been really good at doing is honing in. Like, find your strategy. Don't be all over the place. Like, now you're a master. You understand student housing, and that's how you're going to become the best in it and be able to make the most amount of money. And so I think with a lot of people, it gets really confusing, especially if you're listening to this.
Yeah.
And every week you hear a different strategy. It might be like overwhelming on what you want to get into. So I think it's super important to align with what you like and what works for you, and just hone in and become the best at that. So do you actually like really enjoy this student housing, or is it something you kind of just stuck with because you're good at?
Yeah. So this is such a good like concept, because I think one, it's so easy to get analysis paralysis inside a real estate investment, especially when you're starting out, right? Yeah. And there's this process of like, okay, they might be fearful in the beginning because they don't know, right? And so you get educated, and some of that fear goes away, but it never completely goes away. And so like the next step is like action, and you have to take like education and then take action, or else you're always stuck in that fear zone. But I liked how you said too, like what resonates with you the most, because a lot of times people will just like whatever the shiny object is, or whoever, let's say it's like, I'm going to take, you know, Bill Gates' advice or Warren Buffett, because they have so much money, but they don't resonate with you. It's just not fun and exciting. And so I tell everybody, I'm like, who resonates with you? You really will, 100%. Yeah, and it's not exciting and fun. You don't get passionate, and so you're doing it like as a job versus doing it because you love it. And so I think that's great advice. It's like, who resonates with you the most, and what strategy resonates with you the most. And so for me, like I have been all over the place as far as doing different strategies and like different things. And like I've flipped houses a little bit. I've used the BRRRR strategy a lot, different things like that. And I would say like the number one thing for me is more lifestyle investing. And so when I go buy a property, it's like, hey, does this fit my lifestyle? And early on, it was like, hey, I can create this passive income as quick as I can, and it's going to kind of fund my lifestyle. But more and more recently, it's interesting because even my highest ROI properties, like I'm okay getting rid of some of those to get more into these things that I want to hold and like love doing and long-term be a part of. And so even like the house that I bought in Maui is a perfect example of that. Like my wife and I, we set a goal. I have two little girls, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, but we set a goal a few years ago. We're like, hey, we want to go 1 month out of the year, live in a different country and go somewhere else. And so a year ago we did this for the first time, and it actually wasn't even a different country. We went to St. Thomas, and we were there for a month, and we loved it. We're like, hey, our life, like we're more present. We have more fun with our kids. We took our nanny out there. So like work was good and business was good. We just worked for a few hours in the morning and felt like it got more done. Went to the beach every day, and we're like, this is just a good quality of life. And so we're like, how do we go find a beach house somewhere? And it went on the goal board. And then less than a year later, we bought this house on Maui. And so I love telling people about it, because it was like this goal of like, hey, we want to go have a beach house somewhere. And then the way that we bought it, there's 2 studio apartments that are connected to this house. They call them ohanas out in Hawaii. And so like both of those being rented out helps pay for the main house and covers just about the mortgage on the main house. And so initially we're like, oh, this is awesome. We can come back and forth to the main house and we can rent the other ones. And the way that we bought it for $1 million, put $200,000 into the rehab, and then it just appraised for 1.7. And so we got all of our money back out of the deal, plus it's covered by the other tenants. And so I just love like this form of lifestyle investing. And like no matter what strategy you use,
Wow.
like how do you use real estate investing to make life more fun and enjoyable and do the stuff that you want to do.
Right.
Yeah.
We actually just hosted a Super Bowl party at one of our investment properties. And it's funny because we don't own a house ourselves that we live in. We rent. And we were sitting on her bed and we're like, oh, if only like we want to have like a big house to host all our friends at, but none of our friends, because we live in LA, it's so expensive, none of our friends have a huge house. And we were just kind of sitting there and Kinsey was like, we own 3 houses right now. Like we can go celebrate
3 multi-million-dollar houses. I was like, wait,
yeah,
use
she's
our
like,
houses.
why don't we go there? Like, if no one, we're not renting it out right now. Like, we're trying to sell it. Like, it's not selling. Like, let's go use it. And I just realized in that moment, wow, you can also have a lot of fun while you're owning these houses. And like you were saying, lifestyle investing, make it fun. You know, I'd rather cash flow $500 and have something that I love versus like a couple thousand and I hate managing it and I don't like going there, because then it kind of takes the joy out of what it's supposed to be, which is like freedom and like you get to spend your time doing what you want to do.
And we've also been seeing lately, I mean, we're Airbnb-ing some of our properties now, and this is very new to us on the Airbnb thing, and that's been so shiny object. Everybody's very pro Airbnb or online at least, you know. Oh my God, you make so much money. But this has been miserable. Like Airbnb guests are out of their mind. They are crazy, and it's like every 3 days you have a new person. They all have new complaints. They want, Jess goes like sets up chocolates and flowers, like goes out of her way for every guest, and they still like will request money back on Airbnb because the sheets weren't ironed. And it's just like maybe it's because it's high end, they're crazy, but we're like, sorry, this isn't it for us. Like we know now, like that is just takes it out of you. We're like flipping also really takes it out of you, but I love design, so it fills my heart when I can turn something that was like falling to the ground to like something so gorgeous. That really, really excites me and keeps me going, and all day I'm looking at how I can make a house prettier. So finding those things that fill you up is so important in this business because it's hard. Yeah. You know, it's so fun, it's exciting, but it's really, really hard. So if there's any way that you can find a way to get through it, it's got to be that you like what you're doing. Yeah.
Do you Airbnb your Maui house at all, like the main house?
No, I don't. It's actually, so it's interesting because it penciled as a long-term rental, just the numbers worked really well on it. And they are pretty strict over there. It's right outside of the short-term rental zoning. And so they crack down pretty hard. So
They do.
Unfortunately, they don't allow me.
That's another thing with Airbnb. You can't really get to get one of our Huntington Beach properties on Airbnb. Oh my gosh, they wanted this big of a stack of paperwork. It needs to be your primary resident. I'm like going to the DMV. I hope nobody sees this. Going to the DMV and changing my address to that address on my driver's license to get this thing on Airbnb. Like,
you do have to go above and beyond just to do that.
They've gotten so strict, and then we had to mail letters to every surrounding neighbor that it's going to be an Airbnb. We need a crazy inspection, and then you're not even really cash flowing that positive. I'm like, it just makes more sense as a long-term rental. But for us, it's been working because while we're on the market,
I was going to say we don't have the luxury of deciding we want to keep it and like have the holding cost for the next 3 years. So while we're in a downturn market, we still have it on the market to sell. And Airbnb has helped a lot with the interest payments. Like it's covered like more than 70% of the interest payments for one of the houses. So just having
and we're not fully booked out because we need to show it. So we keep days available to showing, to have open houses, but this way it's covering the large. I mean, we have such big costs every single month, so there's always ways to figure it out.
I love that. I love that.
What's your long-term like vision and goal of your business?
Yeah, such a good question. So for me, it's so funny because I love real estate and I love the creativity aspect of it more than anything probably. And I love how like you can just like have a little bit of hustle and like learn about it, and you don't have to have all this money, and you can go build like an awesome, successful life. Right. And so I've gotten so passionate about that aspect of it. And right now, like I know a company called Real Estate Investing School where like that's what we do is we teach people about it. And I'm so passionate. I still invest all the time, and every time I'm like, okay, I need to slow down, and then I'll somehow land something and get into it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm slowing down on buying real estate. I'm just gonna focus more on the teaching and growing and all those things, and somehow I keep finding myself back around to buying more on properties. So that's a long way of saying, I guess, of I don't really know. Like, I love it right now, and it's so good, and it's treating me so well, and it's not going anywhere. And I've always been one to invest for the passive income, and I love the freedom that comes from just building up that monthly passive cash flow that comes from real estate and owning rental properties. And that's like allowed me to live, my dream life like early on. And I still have aspirations to grow with that. But one of my words this year is just like stabilize. That's like my word for 2023. And so like I have 3 or 4 projects going on right now that are new construction projects that will add a lot to like that monthly passive income. And I'm just focused on finishing those and then just sharing as much as I can with the process of it and the knowledge of real estate and how to go do it and how to go reverse engineer what I've been able to do at a young age. That's probably what fires me up the most. And I'm just going to keep picking up real estate along the way.
Yeah.
I love that. Do you do any conferences at all, or is it just like more coaching online? Like in-person conferences?
Yeah, we've had, it's another reason why I came to, well, I had one in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago, and then one last weekend, and then we do about two a year with real estate investing school. It's called the Cash Flow Conference, and those are in person.
Oh, cool. I love that. So then all your students get to come and like meet each other from like their school.
Yeah, yep, they love it. So they get to meet their coach. They a lot of times they'll work with a coach for 6 months and they haven't met him in person, and so they love getting together. And then everybody's in a pod within the school too, so like they get close to their pod members, and so everybody loves just like the in-person stuff where they get to meet up and see everybody's face in real life.
We are
cool.
like the biggest pro conference people ever. We love to go to all these events. We always are like, because you network with so many people, you never know who you're going to meet. It's like in that 3
Totally.
days, most of the time, like the connections you leave with, the knowledge you leave with is just insane. So I think anybody should make it a goal twice a year, go to a conference, because, and we even say it for us, like we were feeling like exhausted at the end of last year, like so burnt out. We were like, then we went to another conference and got us back up. And I was like, I think you need that little boost every once in a while of everybody motivating you. So if you feel a little burnt, go to a conference, get that like juice back in you and keep going.
What is it
Yes.
with your school? Do you have like a strategy that you kind of teach, or is it just overall like how to get cash flowing properties?
Yeah, so both.
Okay.
So both overall how to cash flow and prop. That's the focus of it. So like we're not like send people to you if they want to learn how to flip houses. But we basically take people through, and this is what's fun about having like a one-on-one coach is it gets very like personalized, and so we teach a bunch of different strategies, and then ultimately like with them and their coach we like figure out, okay, first off, like what's your goal and where do you want to go, because your goal is not the same as everybody else. And I think it's important, everybody listening too, it's like real estate is not all created equal, and just because you're a real estate investor you could get something completely out of it that somebody else wants out of it. And so first, like just defining and getting clarity on what that destination looks like for you, and then getting clear on where you're at. Like that might be what money you have to work with, what you don't have to work with, what skill sets do you have, what are your current properties like? Do you have equity in there? Is there a way to use that? Like all of these things we dive deep, and then the whole purpose is like, how do we craft the best strategy that's going to get you from where you are now to where you want to go? And so we just hone in on that. And so it is a little bit different for everybody, but yeah, we teach a lot on house hacking and house hack hopping. We dive a lot into like the BRRRR strategy, a lot of seller finance and owner finance stuff. The main focus, I would say overall, is how do you go take the least amount of your own money to create the most amount of passive income and freedom.
Yeah, that's something we learned too, because you don't want to use, I did get told like a couple years ago by a really successful investor, never use all of your own money because then if you do, either like lose it or you have to sit on the property a little bit longer, you really have nothing to pull from at that point. Like you can run dry pretty quickly. So I think using other people's money, obviously always be responsible with it. But at least if you're not using your own money, in case of an emergency, you have something to kind of like bring to the table.
But there is something about not having any money that makes you work your ass off.
Yeah. Being broke.
That you're like, when you have a cushion, it's not as like sometimes when we are like all the money's in the properties, I'm like, well shit, I gotta get to work.
We have another option.
Yeah, really put the
your back's up against the wall.
Yeah. It does put your back against the wall. But
100%.
I think moving forward, like I don't want to always be liquid broke. Right? Like at some point I need something to live off of. But
yeah, and it's interesting because I have the most money I've ever had now, and I use the least amount of my own money to invest in real estate.
Wow.
Which is like a lot of people, the biggest thing for them is like, oh yeah, like, well, if I had a lot of money, of course I would invest in real estate. And I'm like, wait, hold up. I invested more of my own money back in the day when I didn't have as much of it than I do now. And so I think it just goes to show, you don't need money to like really do real estate.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's super motivating.
That's what we've learned too. Because you get smarter and you're like, I don't really need, like, other people.
You get smarter. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have so much knowledge at that point that they want their money in real estate, but it's hard to understand this business and to really know what you're doing. And so the people that have earned that and worked hard to be able to make safe investments.
Yeah.
Now it's like, okay, the people who haven't spent that time,
'cause when
10
you're
years
newer,
of knowledge, they're like, take my money and so I don't mess up, Because most people, if they have a side income or side money, like maybe they have a full-time job and they're like, okay, I've saved $500K and like I don't know what to do with it, I don't have time, then you step in and you're like, well, present.
I'm so passionate about the school side of things just because when I got started, it was like like you learn one of two ways. Like it takes either time or it takes money, right? And a lot of times you lose both, especially when you're starting out early on. And so I remember just like looking, I would just take anything that I could get my hands on, like books, podcasts. Like, this is why I love what you guys are doing here. Like, it's so cool because this is a majority of what I learned is from podcasts, and I just consume as much as I could. And like my philosophy was like, there's some sort of learning from osmosis that comes from just constantly learning about this stuff. And so I'm so passionate about that. But ultimately, like, going out and doing it on my own, it cost me time and it cost me money. And so I'm so passionate about the school because it's so fun to be like, hey, this can actually save you time and save you money because you don't have to learn everything, and you can learn the stuff that's most important. So obviously people can, always reach out about that or go to realestateinvestingschool.com and you can actually book a free strategy call. But I mean, if that is for somebody, great. If it's not, I would just say like the biggest thing is just, it's not as far away as most people think. And there's so much power in like one deal completely changed someone's life. And it doesn't matter your background, doesn't matter where you're coming from, what you have to work with. Like, it's more of a mindset, and there's always a way to go make it happen and like completely change your life. And I think life is just, it's like what we do every single day. And we should wake up in the morning and be fulfilled and fired up and be so excited to just go get after it, whatever that looks like. And if you're going through life thinking like, oh, like when I get enough money saved up, or like eventually I'll get there, or maybe when I, 5 more years, like, to me, that's just not a fun way to live. And so I would just say, dude, you can do it today. You can dream bigger, and you can do it faster than you ever thought possible. It is just right around the corner.
I love that. Sign me up. All right. I love that you left the audience with that. Start today. Start learning today. Pull the trigger. That's amazing. Well, I've learned so much, and I just want to say thank you. And if there's anything you ever need, we're in LA, and that's where we do all our flips.
You've got a friend in us, so we'll stay connected. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. You guys are incredible.